This storyline doesn't make any sense, and I agree. I am disappointed. So the basic synopsis is that Jen takes a plea deal which inhibits her ability to become the Hulk. And based on that, she wants to look for counseling, and thus doing, she tries to reconnect with Abomination, so ends up at his retreat, which unfortunately ends up hosting her enemies for most of the season. That's the basic gist of what happens during this episode. So the good, the bad, the ugly, what is it? I would say that the good is that there were scenes really where there was an understanding of some of the deficits of this particular episode, and that there was some kind of understanding of some of the criticism that has been launched or lobbed towards She-Hulk during the whole season. So that was some of the good parts of it. Also, the part at the beginning that was kind of retro, where they were trying to hint back at 70s or old school She-Hulk renditions, that was pretty good. I personally don't have a problem with Maslany, who plays She-Hulk. So I think with what she had, she did a great job. The writing, consistently, I had issues with the writing. I didn't really find the jokes funny, and unfortunately I'll probably repeat myself, but for something that's supposed to be a comedy, I think it kind of paled in comparison to other shows, even for example Deadpool, where I had issues with Deadpool, but the jokes really never landed. The timing often, to me, with the jokes wasn't really good, and then the delivery didn't really work. And then they had some outstanding actors like Roth playing Abomination, and then they underused people like that, and that really kind of made it hard, especially underusing power actors like Roth. But overall, the problem is that the writing was a little bit boring, and that the action for a Hulk, there wasn't enough action in this particular episode. And then the episode, they didn't make it an hour, they still kept it about a half an hour. And I'm still wondering why, for example, they didn't actually hire professional comics to do some of the writing on the jokes if they were really going for funny, because that seemed to be lacking in this episode. And then many of all, there really was no problem that I really had with it, especially in this episode, because she was attempting, the main character, to correct or connect with us about some of our confusion about the plot lines, and it didn't really make any sense. But the problem is that what happened that didn't make any sense in the last episode was some of the same stuff that didn't make any sense for the whole season. And then truthfully, to have that the She-Hulk's main enemies were essentially, once again, something that you find on YouTube, the Manosphere, that really was weak. And that really was something crippling from my perspective as a comic book stan. That was kind of crippling to really kind of relegate the character to not any kind of real animosity towards her. And then there wasn't any real buildup of why she had all these enemies. So that wasn't really very clear. The fact that, oh, she's a female superhero, no, that was kind of weak. That aspect of the plot didn't make any sense. So what would have made more sense from my perspective if they were going to go with some of the stuff that they were going? If they were going to go the way they were going, what they could have created is that some of the people that were put away because of her actions as someone in the prosecutor's office or someone originally in the city, that some of those men teamed up and went after her. That would have made more sense. I would have been on board for a bunch of dudes that she put away banding together, especially if those dudes were villains with real track records of crime. So my main thing with the finale is that we're actually dealing with the She-Hulk. And the truth is, when you look back on the season, her battles were really underwhelming. So I wanted to really kind of broach Titania, because Titania basically was created using one of Dr. Doom's campaigns to create supervillains. So her level of prowess and power was not really demonstrated in the show, and I think they could have done this in a different way. So they're going to come back for a second season, most likely, because I just think that's the way they're going. They may want to actually delve into who really Titania is, instead of just having her be some kind of funny with no power, because she's really a very powerful supervillain. And especially in the She-Hulk corner of the universe, they could do a lot more with her, and she would have made a better season finale enemy. Titania is one of the most powerful supervillains in the MCU. I didn't see that in the finale. I didn't see that in She-Hulk. I'm wondering why. Why? And then, like, turning one of the darkest characters, and I mean in terms of, like, the comic book Daredevil is dark. The whole thing is dark. The basis of the character is his faith, his connection to his faith. And that's why there's so much darkness. And then he's caught up in, struggling with sin himself. He's like a hardcore Catholic, and that's something that moves him. That's very, very important. And so to just cast away all of his darkness, which is a lot of it, his darkness has to do with the connection with his faith and his chastising himself, that doesn't work for me. Of the two, I could do away with She-Hulk and be fine with Daredevil. So they kind of like weakened him and turned him into somebody who's just like running around with She-Hulk. Matt Murdock is really this altruistic guy who fights for the little guy and is from a working class area in really what is originally a real area in New York City. And so now the idea that he's hooking up with Jen Walters, as presented in this series, who just thinks about herself and really doesn't think about anybody else, doesn't make sense. I was also really kind of frustrated that the action continually, but specifically in the finale, that there really wasn't too much action. There was very little action. It was just a lot of talking, and even the talking, once again, the talking wasn't really funny. And the truth is, going back to, and this is a spoiler, the scene where we get to see Gal and the writers, we're about as upset as She-Hulk or Jen Walters is with the writers, because they've written this stuff that doesn't really make sense and have forced us to watch it for a bunch of weeks.